Hello and welcome to another episode of This Week I Watched. Although I'm not a huge fan of the title, so if you have any ideas to rename this type of video, it's going to be a lot of one-off film reviews, please leave a comment down below. I want to rename it one-shot reviews, but I don't know how Marvel would feel about that considering they've got their one-shot short films. Today, I will be covering many new-ish streaming releases as well as one theatrical release, and I'll be doing it in popularity order rather than viewing order. I will be reviewing Thor Love and Thunder, Hustle, Cha-Cha Real Smooth, Moonfall, The Man from Toronto, The Princess, and Hollywood Stargirl. Let's get it started with Thor Love and Thunder. Thor embarks on a journey unlike anything he's ever faced, a quest for inner peace. After his retirement is interrupted by Gore the God Butcher, a galactic killer who seeks the extinction of the gods, Thor enlists the help of King Valkyrie, Korg, and ex-girlfriend Jane Foster, who now inexplicably wields Mjolnir as the mighty Thor. Together they embark upon a harrowing cosmic adventure to uncover the mystery of the God Butcher's vengeance and stop him before it's too late. This is available in theaters only, but it will probably be available for streaming on Disney Plus after August 24. As a fan of Taika Waititi, Thor, and Marvel as a whole, I enjoyed this movie, but there are still quite a few flaws, and I didn't enjoy it nearly as much as I enjoyed the previous Thor film, Ragnarok. Let's start with the good. The costumes are absolutely wild and amazing. They look like they were ripped straight out of the comics. The fight in the Shadow Realm, with the black and white aesthetic and only slight color breaking through, was absolutely one of the most artistic things I've seen from Marvel, tied with the Doctor Strange music fight, at least within this set of Phase 4. I'm not really comparing it to the previous ones, but definitely within Phase 4, those two scenes are some of the most artistic things I've ever seen. Christian Bale also brought his A-game in playing this tortured villain character and was able to elevate a lack of screen time and plot contrivances due to the accelerated character shifts. I find the character of Thor has been going through the 5 stages of grief since Ragnarok, and even through this film, although on an accelerated timeline. All through this time, he's been going from battle to battle and hasn't been able to properly grieve his father, Loki, Heimdall, his homeworld, Asgard, although there is this new Asgard, and his hammer, Mjolnir. During that time, he was in denial and shoving his feelings deep down just to focus on the battle. At the beginning of Endgame, where he is beheaded, he beheads Thanos, he is fully in the anger stage, although he's probably in that stage when confronting him at the end of Infinity War as well. After the 5-year time gap, or time jump, we see a depressed Thor, until the very end where he seems to be starting to move forward. This film begins with him in the bargaining stage since he's not really sure exactly where he wants to go, if he wants to continue fighting or lay down his arms. And we almost hope that he's moving into this almost acceptance phase, but he hasn't reached that point until the end of this film. But I'll get back to that a bit later. Once he goes back to New Asgard and sees Jane with Mjolnir, he regresses to an earlier stage, this time needing to deal more with his feelings for Jane as well as Mjolnir. On top of all that, Jane is dying of cancer. Their relationship seems to be going well, but when she reveals her diagnosis, Thor doesn't want to lose her again. He gets angry at her for wanting to help him in this final battle and bargains with her to stay in the hospital so that she will live and their relationship can begin anew. When she instead comes to help him, he's sad since he knows that she will die and they will not get their second chance at love. Now for the bad. Russell Crowe's accent was incredibly distracting, odd, and out of place. They should have just had him speak normally. I heard they actually had him record his lines both with a Greek accent and a British accent, and I would have almost preferred they tried something that was a little bit less cartoonish. The comedic moments also didn't really land as much or as hard for me as with Ragnarok, although there was a lot more drama in this film, in my opinion, that would have been undercut had they over-exaggerated the humor. I would have loved to see more of the Jane Foster Mighty Thor arc, and hope that maybe they can bring her character back in some sort of multiversal event, and we can see more of this character, and especially her evolution in this role. I think a lot of that has to do with this movie being shortened, really, because they filmed 4 hours of the movie. Now, of course, Taika says most of that other 2 hours was jokes, but I find that quite hard to believe. So I have to wonder if there's a whole lot of plot that they just cut out for having multiple storylines instead. I also felt that this movie needed more Valkyrie and a more fleshed out plot overall with Gore the God Butcher. And again, I've heard, as I was saying earlier, I've heard rumors that Marvel told Taika to keep this movie under 2 hours, and if that's true, then Marvel needs to get out of its own way, since they've had a lot of pacing issues in these Phase 4 projects compared to the other phases. I would rather an amazing movie at 2 hours and 20 minutes, 2 hours 30 minutes, 3 hours like The Batman was, although I don't think this movie necessarily needed 3 hours, than an okay one at an hour and a half. The worst scene in this movie by far is when Melissa McCarthy shows up as Hela in the stage play. It was the one thing that took me out of this movie and made it feel like a terrible SNL sketch, on top of it being a rehash of a joke from Ragnarok. Although when they bring back Matt Damon and Luke Hemsworth in a later scene, I think that scene really works, and they could have kept that in without even having this stage play. I want to talk about some of the criticisms I've been hearing about this movie. One of the main criticisms I've heard is, why didn't Thanos or the Avengers use Eternity during Infinity War or Endgame? Well, Thanos likely didn't know about Eternity, since only the gods are supposed to know, and Thor probably didn't know what the key was to get to Eternity. Also, that wasn't the story that the Russo brothers or the writers of Infinity War and Endgame wanted to tell. The second criticism I've been hearing is about how Taika Waititi and Natalie Portman over-exaggerated how gay this film was, and that it's not gay at all, and that by them saying it's super gay, it screwed up with the people's expectations. And honestly, I feel like by saying this movie is not gay at all is an under-exaggeration, since this movie does feature Korg and his entire species as gay, and Valkyrie is at least bisexual, although they could have, again, fleshed it out a little bit more, instead, and probably shouldn't have advertised it necessarily as super gay, just advertise that, yes, there is some LGBTQ plus representation in this film. Overall, I rated this film a 4 out of 5, and I placed it at number 13 in my overall Marvel ranking, just below Black Panther and just above Spider-Man Far From Home, but I reserve the right to move it around once I rewatch the MCU at some point. I have a feeling that a lot of things are going to go up, and a lot of things are also going to go down. So we'll see when I get to that in, I don't know, a couple years. Let's move on to the next film, Hustle. After discovering a once-in-a-lifetime player with a rocky past abroad, a down-on-his-luck basketball scout takes it upon himself to bring the phenom to the States without his team's approval. Against the odds, they have one final shot to prove that they have what it takes to make it to the NBA. This is available for streaming on Netflix in both Canada and the US, and probably worldwide as well, since it's a Netflix original. Adam Sandler showed his dramatic acting chops, and he needs to choose more films like this. I understand how much he enjoys making comedies, and he doesn't have to stop, but he should choose more films like this, especially if he wants to be nominated for an Oscar, and even more so if he wants to win one. Juancho Hernan Gomez shakes the stereotype of athletes being terrible actors, and he puts in a pretty good performance in the supporting role. There are also plenty of other athlete actors in this film, and none of the prominent ones stand out in particularly bad ways. This is not your usual sports film, especially one that revolves around a team sport, specifically basketball. This felt a lot more like Rocky or Creed, but for basketball, and it works to revitalize this genre in some ways. I rated this film a 3.5 out of 5. Now let's move on to Cha-Cha Real Smooth. Fresh out of college and stuck at his New Jersey home without a clear path forward, 22-year-old Andrew begins working as a party starter for bar and bat mitzvahs, where he strikes up a unique friendship with a young mom and her teenage daughter. This is available for streaming on Apple TV Plus in both Canada and the United States. Again, this is an Apple TV Plus original. I have a feeling this is the movie that last year's music wanted to be and thought it was, but it could never be what this film is due to its lack of authenticity. This movie features a new and unknown actor, Vanessa Burghardt. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but she's playing the role of Lola, Domino, Dakota Johnson's daughter, who is on the autistic spectrum. This role is incredibly authentic because Cooper Rateliff, who's the director and actor playing the lead role of Andrew, took input from Vanessa on how her mannerisms are, and she was able to incorporate that into this character. Lola is a character who's not defined by her diagnosis. She's a real character just like any of the others within the film, and I commend them for properly representing someone with a neurodivergence, especially as someone who deals with ADHD on a daily basis. Where I find this film lacked was with the other characters, and I felt as though they should have maybe tied Domino somehow into the character that Andrew met at the beginning of the film. I also think the pacing was a bit off, and it made the film feel a bit longer than it actually was, and there were many moments I wasn't sure if I was laughing with the movie or at the movie. In the end, I rated this a 3.5 out of 5. Now let's move on to Moonfall. The world stands on the brink of annihilation when a mysterious force knocks the moon from its orbit and sends it hurtling towards a collision course with Earth. With only weeks before impact, NASA executive Jacinda Jo Fowler teams up with a man from her past and a conspiracy theorist for an impossible mission into space to save humanity. This is available for streaming on Amazon Prime in Canada, and it's available for rent or purchase in the United States. I didn't think any movie of 2022 could be worse than The Bubble, and I know this film came out after or before The Bubble, but anyway, this movie came in and said, hold my beer. I didn't care about any of the characters, and I also found they made incredibly dumb decisions, especially just staring at danger instead of doing anything about it. This movie has an idiotic plot and poor acting to complement it. The writing is basically like a sequel to Geostorm, literally. And Casey's dialogue specifically sucks off Elon Musk multiple times. Visually, it was washed out and looked like it was all filmed on sound stages for TV and had very poor CGI, especially the vehicles looking super fake and blatant product placement from Lexus. I've seen better CGI and better storytelling, absolutely, from the Orville, and they only have a TV budget. $20 million per season versus $150 million for a 2-hour film. I rated this movie a 1 out of 5, and it is currently my least favorite movie of the year. Now let's move on to The Man from Toronto. In a case of mistaken identity, the world's deadliest assassin, known as the Man from Toronto, and a New York City screw-up are forced to team up after being confused for each other at an Airbnb. This is available for streaming on Netflix in Canada and the US, probably around the rest of the world as well, because this is a Netflix original. I went into this film wanting to hate it for their mispronunciation of Toronto. They pronounced it Toronto. It's supposed to be a silent second T. Anyways, they only pronounced Toronto right once in this film, and it was a side character that was barely in this movie, although later on in that same scene, the same character says it wrong. It's Toronto, not Toronto, if you want to sound authentic. I also didn't want to like it since the Man from Toronto should have been an actor from Toronto. The first scene came in and told me, wait, you might actually enjoy this one. It was so hilarious to me, but I understand if somebody doesn't like that scene, especially if they aren't a fan of Kevin Hart. Sadly, once Kevin Hart and Woody Harrelson meet up during a plane confrontation, this movie takes a steep dive and keeps dropping. There were a bunch of stupid jokes about gender pronouns, and if you've watched the movie, you understand what I'm talking about, and terrible CGI outside the plane, which we all know they can do better since Sony released Uncharted earlier this year, which has a similar scene and better VFX, and they also made this film. They also wasted their one F-bomb on a stupid line that, and they're only allowed one because this movie is PG-13. They had a later opportunity that would have been a little bit better, but still not as effective as it could have been with just a little bit better writing, or it could have just not been there. The CGI and set pieces never really improve, and everything consistently looks fake, just like Moonfall. And the end battle in Marty's Fitness also rips off its style quite a bit from the Kingsman films to a lesser degree of effectiveness. Some nitpicks I have for the movie is that there's a scene where they show puke on camera, and I believe that everyone should stop showing puke in film. It's gross, usually used for cheap laughs, and just overall unnecessary. I usually actually take a half star off movies anytime I see them show puke or a fart joke that is like just terrible. I remove a half a star. So that's a little bit of insight on how I rate some of these movies. There's also a line where Woody Harrelson's character, who is the man from Toronto, says, "After I stop this poser." And it was a missed opportunity to use some Canadian slang, since this is a Canadian character. So he should have instead said, "After I stop this hoser." You know? Come on, it's a missed opportunity. And they should have done that, and they should have thought about that. But I guess there's American writers who probably don't know the Canadian slang. When this movie started, I may have given it as high as a 3.5 out of 5, but by the end, I rated this movie a 1 out of 5. It's also one of the worst movies I've seen this year. Now, let's move on to the second last film I will be covering for this video, The Princess. A beautiful, strong-willed young royal refuses to wed the cruel sociopath to whom she is betrothed and is kidnapped and locked in a remote tower of her father's castle. With her scorned, vindictive suitor intent on taking her father's throne, the princess must protect her family and save the kingdom. This is available for streaming on Disney Plus in Canada and on Hulu in the United States. Before starting this film, I didn't actually check the MPAA rating, and I thought this was a PG-13 movie. That is, until a brutal action sequence in the first 5 to 10 minutes, which instantly hooked me. I was instantly hooked, more so than the trailer could do anything. And although I didn't really see much of the trailer because I saw it on ads on TikTok or Instagram or something like that. Anyways, this story is almost like what if Rapunzel, since she's locked in a tower, was secretly good at martial arts and weaponry. The knights she fights are more like video game NPC characters that are often oblivious and just an obstacle to get through. The main villains are hamming it up like they usually do in Disney movies, except when Julius becomes a full-on child predator. Despite this, the action scenes were pretty well shot and choreographed, and even though it was a shaky cam sequence, and maybe more for all I remember, it was easy to follow and it didn't cause motion sickness. Another issue I had was with the Fat Knight that the writers, directors, and editors probably thought was funnier than it actually was, and it didn't mesh with the rest of this film. Joey King was great in the lead role, and I could see her doing a great job playing a superhero role like Batgirl or even Squirrel Girl. Overall, this wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, but it was not great either, and plays upon themes and story elements from other films, worse films, to be honest, like Coming to America. I rated this movie a 3 out of 5. Now let's move on to the last film I'll be covering, Hollywood Stargirl. When Stargirl's mother is hired as a costume designer on a movie, they relocate to LA, where Stargirl quickly becomes involved with an eclectic assortment of characters. This is available for streaming on Disney Plus in Canada and the US, potentially plenty of other places since it is a Disney Plus original. I remember liking the first film, but I can't quite remember much of what happens in the movie. I do remember some scenes, but I'm not going to say exactly what those scenes are, just in case you wanted to check it out. But this movie solidified the idea that Disney Plus original films are generally better quality in terms of look than DCOM's Disney Channel original movies, but it still isn't much better in terms of story, although some are pretty good. This film's central conflict and many other conflicts within this film seemed rushed and almost too easy to solve. This first film was magic in its simplicity and heartwarming storytelling during a difficult time. It came out in March or April. It came out around the time when everything was kind of shutting down and we were all in a slightly depressed mood. So I watched it and it lifted my spirits. I quite enjoyed the first film. It was a circumstance of perfect timing, in all honesty. This film, on the other hand, failed to capture the same spirit for me and left me actually quite lukewarm. Also want to mention that Terrell, one of the characters in this film, should have known how to use a cassette tape. I don't know how old the character's supposed to be, but considering the actor was born in 1997 and most of the other cast are playing characters around their age, he likely grew up with them, and the character's probably that same age as well. Like I was born in 1998, so I grew up with cassette tapes and I would know how to use them, so the fact that this character Terrell wouldn't is a little bit odd to me. I rated this film a 2.5 out of 5, which is a dip from the previous movie that I rated a 3.5 out of 5. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more from me, please hit the subscribe button. If you have any suggestions or information you'd like to share, any trivia about these films, or any of your own personal feelings on these films, please leave a comment down below. I am going to also remind you that I need a new title for this series. I would love to hear your suggestions. If you like this idea of calling it one-shots and you don't think Marvel would mind, please let me know. I think the next video I'm going to be doing is a director review for John Hughes. And then after that, I will be doing a franchise review for the Predator films, since their prequel, sequel, reboot, I don't know what it is, Prey, is going to be coming out on Disney Plus and probably Hulu in the United States soon. So I'll be doing that because I've never seen those movies. And I'll probably try to get that out for you definitely by August 2nd, although I will be traveling at that time, so please be patient if it doesn't show up on that day, maybe a little bit later and in a different location. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.